Okay, hello everybody. Welcome on in here to our user group webinar. My name is Jim. I am coming to you live on a sunny day here in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome on in. We're going to be spending the next 20 minutes or so discussing setting up to getting ready to use and setting up the scheduler module here in Church Windows. There's a little bit of legwork that you can put in for folks who are just beginning to use the scheduler module ahead of time. Setting this module up before you really dive in and start using it will make it a heck of a lot more useful to you. So that's what we're going to be spending our time talking about here this morning, that setup process. Before we get started on that, a word about your GoToWebinar control panel, which everybody here has on your screen. Specifically, there's this little red button in the upper left-hand corner usually, with an arrow on it that you can use to either minimize or maximize that control panel. You can minimize it to give yourself a little more room on your screen to see what we're talking about here today. Maximizing it gives you access to all those features on there, specifically the questions portion that you can use to type in questions that you might have on this topic as we go through our presentation here today. It shouldn't take too much. I wouldn't anticipate this taking the full 20 minutes here today, so I will, in addition, leave the room, the webinar room open after that time to answer any questions that you might have as we go along here. So if anybody here has any of the regional training manuals that we have, the material that I'm going to be covering in our presentation here today is from the Scheduler S101 manual, pages 5 through 16 is what I'm going to use for our presentation here today. So with zero further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and launch our scheduler module. Scheduler is a calendar program, like many other calendar programs that you use, whether it be a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar or any electronic calendars that you might have access to, but specifically designed for use for a church and also able to interface with your membership module that allows you to assign folks as contacts or to assign them duties to any event that you create here. So let's talk about some of these basically are properties that you can set up for different events that you will later add to your scheduler. Starting with categories. So most of these things that we're going to be talking about today are here on your setup menu. So categories, if you open up setup and click on categories, it takes you to this window right here. Events that you create here in the schedule can be grouped into categories so that you can print reports based upon a particular category. You can view your calendar filtered by specific types of categories. So this is the place where you can create those. You see we've got several of them already set up. A building rental category, classes categories we've got set up, worship services categories that we've got set up on here. Creating a new category is simply a matter of clicking on our little add button down here in the lower left hand corner of this window. When you click on add, you'll see it populate with a new category on the screen here, and you can edit the name of that category right up here. Let's go ahead and set up a weddings category for all of the weddings that we may have in our sanctuary here. So you set it up, you type in the name up here. Any notes that you might have about that? Just some general notes about events that would be within that category you can set up in here. The other thing is you can set a particular color for a category. Later, when you start entering all of your events into the scheduler, there's going to be a small colored bar over to the left side of the little event bubbles that you see here. And you can change the colors for all of those. So as I scroll through and look at these other ones, you'll see that they've got different colors to them. So I can set the color for my weddings here by clicking my select color button here. So we've got a bunch of sort of pre-formatted colors over here, and then we've got a full kind of color wheel that we can use over here on the right side. I can make that a little lighter if I want to, or darker by using this slider panel arrow button over here. Okay, so that is setting up categories. Again, these are properties that you'll apply to events that you create in your scheduler at some point in the future. So that's adding a category. Again, you'll notice that if I want to change something about any of these categories, in fact, I can use my edit button down here at the bottom. And make any changes to the name of the group, to the color, or the notes there by using that edit button. If there is a category that you no longer wish to use, you can use this delete button here. Note that if you already have events set up in your scheduler with that category assigned to it, it does not delete the event itself. What it does is it just removes the category from that event. When you're all set and you're done editing and working with your categories, you simply click your Save and Close button down here in the lower right-hand corner. Okay. Another thing you can create are duties that you can assign to a particular event. These are jobs that have to be performed for a particular event that you set up here in Church Windows. So you see here we've got acolytes, celebrants, greeters set up in here, a host, a money counter, etc. So this works quite similarly. And by the way, when you assign a particular duty to an event at some point in the future, you can then pull records from the membership module. So folks that you have set up in membership, and you can assign them to those duties for a particular event. So these are like different jobs that can be assigned for a particular event. So creating a new duty, it's just like the other screen. I'm going to go ahead and click on my Add button over here. We'll create a building monitor duty. And you set those notes for that particular duty here. Note that there's no just save button on here. It kind of saves as you go. So I could then, if I wanted to, after I did all the updates for the building monitor, if I clicked add, it would take me to a whole new one here, right? If I were to do all of my work on this and click cancel, it would discard all of the changes I made. If I click save and close, it's going to save and close. It'll save all of the updates that I have performed in here. When you're all set with that, same buttons here. You can click edit, you can click delete. The other thing I would point out is you can also generate a report showing you all of that by clicking on the report button. Real quick, we can take a look at what that looks like. Yep, so we're saving the changes that we made because we're running this report. And it's just going to be a simple list of all of those duties that we've got set up in there, okay? Okay. All right, so that is those. That's setting those up for folks. You can also, on the setup menu, add and create equipment that you have available for a particular event. So this here is like all of the things that you can use for any particular event that you have. Whether you have a bunch of microphones, you have a piano that you can wheel around the building for different events, you can set that up in there. really any type of equipment that you want to create for there. So again, it works similarly here. If I click on my add button down here in the lower left-hand corner, it allows you to create a new piece of equipment. Let's say we've got an additional AV table we can use, one of those tables with the little plugs on the sides of it and the wheels underneath there. AV table number 2. Okay, create your notes on there. So a couple of things that are different about equipment. The location you can set up on here, for example, would be like a building, a room that you have set up where that would be stored, where you can usually find that. This is over here in the storage room 1 is where you'll find that AV table number 2. Along the top, you'll see that there's a couple of tabs on here. So if you go to categories, these are the categories of events you'd usually use this piece of equipment for. You can filter categories, you can filter equipment for events by category. I'll show you that towards the end here. So this would be, you'd commonly use it for those, for example. You can also set up a particular contact person who's responsible for this piece of equipment, who you call if you have a problem for it. So you can click add or delete contacts over here to the right side, and you can assign folks from the membership module by selecting a name and clicking on your arrow button over here, and it adds that person as the person who you want to talk to about that particular piece of equipment. When I click OK, you'll notice it shows their name and their home phone number on the list over here. Okay, so that's setting up equipment that you have available for a particular event. Okay. Next one you can set up are locations that you have available for various events and meetings. And again, you'll see a long list of all of these over here that you already have set up in the system. Adding a new one again, you simply click on the add button at the bottom. So you simply create a new room that you have available. Any information that you have that you want to include over here. This is cool down here at the bottom. So include in conflict checking checkbox down here at the bottom. So one of the cool things that you can do when you set up all of this stuff for the scheduler, equipment does this, as does locations. You can generate reports once you've started setting everything up here in the scheduler to show you if there's a particular conflict, if you're using the same piece of equipment for 2 different events at the same time, or whether you have scheduled 2 different events in the same room at the same time. So you can generate these conflict reports. It'll also show you conflicts on your calendar grid as you're just browsing through here. So whether you want to include this in conflict checking or not, you simply check it or uncheck it at the bottom over here. Okay, so you can also set up, just like we did for equipment, a particular room can generally be associated with specific categories here. You can there's an equipment tab. Now what you notice, you can't actually assign it here, but if I come over here to storage room 1, these are bits of equipment that were assigned to that room from the equipment setup screen. Okay, and again, same thing, contacts, if there's a particular person you need to assign as a contact for one of your rooms in the scheduler as well, right there. Okay, so that is setting up locations. Okay, so those are, for the most part, those are the properties that you set up, that you add for a particular event, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment here. So that's the top four over here. Now, shaded areas is the next thing we want to kind of talk about on here. You can set up, and this is just for on your grid here. And I'll show you what this does. And when I click on shaded areas, you can set up any number of shaded areas that you want to on your calendar here. So I'm going to go ahead and you set them up by clicking on your add button at the bottom. I'm going to create a lunchtime shaded area. That goes, and you set the dates that applies to, Monday through Thursday. We do our lunchtime. Let's set it like 12. Oops. Set it like 12:30 to 1:30. And then you can have it be a particular color on your grid. I'm going to go ahead and make lunchtime green. When you get that, you click your add button on here. No, that's when creating a new one. Sorry about that. So once you have created this, you click your OK button here. It applies that, and then you'll see on your grid here, did I do something wrong? Monday through Thursday. Oh, I set that up. Oh, I set it up for AM. Sorry about that. 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. When you create that, that's what happened. It was happening in the middle of the night, and we weren't seeing it on our schedule here. Sorry about that. So it's just a little gray shaded area that you see here on the screen, and I did mess something else up here. Sorry about that. Let me show you. So the area name is the lunch hour, but you have to put a caption with it to have it show up on your scheduler in that way. So I'm just going to caption it as lunch, and when I click OK, you'll actually see that listed on here. So there's a difference between the area name and the caption. So the caption is what actually appears on the calendar grid here when you've set that up on here. Okay. So if I wanted to create a new one, I could do that here. I can set up another one for 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Set up a new color for it. As many of these as you wish to do on your calendar. Okay, so there's our coffee break, there's our lunchtime. I could fill this whole thing up with breaks if I wanted to, but I don't think the boss man would appreciate it. Okay. Last thing. And then we'll take a look real quick about how to use all of this stuff when you're in here. On the setup menu under here where it says options, this is where you can set up what are called different options for this. Okay, so when you first come in here on the General tab, you can set up your, notice when I first opened up the scheduler, it opened me up in what's called the weekly view. There are other views that you can open up to by default here. Let me show you here real quick. There's a daily, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a daily view where you only see the events for the day that you're in, and you can select different days using this calendar over here in the upper right-hand corner. There is a weekly view that shows all the days of the week on here, and there's a monthly view, which gives you the full grid of the entire month, right? So when we're looking here under setup and options, the starting view is which of those three views when you first launch the scheduler, how that's going to show. Okay, so the event duration is the default duration for any event that you create on your scheduler here. The start time is the very top line of your calendar grid when you first open this screen up. So that's the options under general. Refresh data is used if you're networking church windows. So if there are other people in your network that are using the same database and they're making change to the scheduler, this is how often your screen and other people's screens refresh showing changes that somebody else might have made on your network there. The more frequently you set this up, the more network traffic you're kind of setting yourself up for in on your local network there. You only need, you don't really necessarily miss things very often, because I don't think the schedule is updated quite so regularly that you need to check for updates more than every 2 minutes in the system here. So leaving that default is usually going to be fine. Last thing we want to look at is these tooltips here. Basically, a tooltip is when you hover your mouse over one of the events that you have here in your scheduler, it opens up a little pop-up window showing you whatever you design on this screen here. So by default, it's going to show the subject of the event, the time of the event, and the location. You can also alternatively show equipment and any contacts that are set up for that event on here as well. So I'm going to check all 5 of them and I'll show you what it does. Okay. Creating a new event on here, notice it set me to 8 a.m. as the top line here, because that's what we set up on that opening screen, on that property screen. So if I were to create, let's say I'm going to create a new, let's set up our finance committee meetings that we have on Tuesdays at 6:30. So I'm going to select by left clicking the times I want my event to happen. Then I just press the enter key on my keyboard and it opens me up to a new event. This is where you can set up all of this information. So I'll set up finance committee meeting. So here you can set up the location. This is where this is all of that work we did ahead of time. And by the way, this is where you can filter the events by how you set up the locations on the previous screen. So if I go to committee meetings, these are the meeting rooms that are generally associated with them. If you don't filter by any of them, you'll see all of your rooms. Okay, so that's how that bit works. So we'll have this in the meeting room 1. Whoever the contact folks are that you might want to call if you have questions about this event, you can set somebody up there from the membership module. Whatever equipment you need to use for that, we'll use a microphone. Add that. Oh, silly. We'll use a microphone for that. I keep hitting the wrong button. Sorry about that, folks. So you change equipment. I had the wrong button there. I had the setup equipment button that I clicked accidentally. You want to change the events equipment. This is where you assign. Sorry about that. So I'm going to assign the microphone to this. I'm going to assign an overhead projector to this and a speaker set. When you click OK, you'll see all of that equipment assigned to that event. You set this up for a particular category. Change the events categories. This obviously is going to be a committee meeting. And if there are particular duties you want to assign to this, you click on the Add Duty button here. You'll see it selected up here. I am going to need a building monitor for this meeting. And notice here, there's the duty that you see here, and you can assign somebody to that duty from the membership module here. So you can also leave it unassigned if you don't have anybody to do that job yet. And then later you can come back to this event and fill in those duties when you figure out who's going to do this work for you. When you're all set with this, you click your Save button. You're going to see this selected here. It's got the little blue section over here on the left because all of our committee meeting categories have that blue color on the left side. If I hover my mouse over that, it will show you the information that we set up under tooltips there. Okay? And that is all I have to show you guys today. So that's basically the things you're going to want to set up in the scheduler module that give you the full kind of functionality of that module when you're set up on there. So if you're all set to get on with your day, thank you so much for joining me here today. Feel free to click on the X in the upper right-hand corner of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have any questions for me at this time, I'm going to leave the room open for a little while if you have questions, so feel free to type those in now. Thanks for joining me, everybody.